Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, let me give you a quick rundown on what we're all about. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we build fun and inexpensive focused commander decks. A focused commander deck is more tuned than a casual deck, but not quite to the level of a competitive or optimized deck. Today's episode is going to be a special one though, where we exclude the cost of the commander. With just a $25 budget, it's pretty much impossible to build around some commanders unless we do so. Sometimes you get lucky and open up a commander in a pack, or you could just trade for them if you really want to build around them. So our budget is still going to be $25, but again, that's $25 for just 99 cards because we're excluding the cost of that commander. And prices on this show are powered by our sponsor, TCGPLAYER. Before we get started today though, make sure you go check out our new classic pink playmat and Commander's Quarters t-shirts on thecommandersquarters.com. And thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and click that little bell notification icon so that you can stay up to date in the latest Commander's Quarters episodes. Today's commander is Ilharg the Raze-Boar. Ilharg is a 6/6 boar god with trample that costs 3 red. It has, whenever it attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, return that creature to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And when Ilharg dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library third from the top. First off, I'm very excited to say that we finally have a pig commander. Unfortunately, it's not a pig tribal commander, but it is a god, so that kind of makes up for it. But in all seriousness, let's actually dig into this commander. Ilharg is a very unique commander and is a very interesting one to build around. Essentially, it allows you to temporarily cheat creatures in. They already come into play attacking, so you won't get any attack triggers. But what you can get are into the battlefield triggers as well as combat damage triggers. We're going to build a very aggressive deck around Ilharg that's looking to abuse those triggers. So what's our strategy with this deck? Well, we want to get our commander out and quickly start swinging. Ilharg is pretty aggressively costed as a 6/6 for 5 mana. At some point though, we're going to have to make sure that we give Ilharg some evasion to make sure it stays on the board. And then how do we win with this deck? Well, we're going to demolish our opponents and their boards with our enter the battlefield triggers as well as combat damage triggers. And these aren't going to be small creatures that we're cheating in, they're going to be huge. With their power and their effects, we can take out our opponents quickly. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to break this deck down into 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how you're going to win with it. So let's go on to our first tactic. Tactic number 1, Swine time. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land and put into play tapped. And then we're running Fractured Power Stone, Prismatic Lens, and Guardian Idol, each of which costs 2 and taps for a colorless. Guardian Idol does enter the battlefield tapped, but we can turn it into a 2/2 for 2 mana. Next up is Mind Stone, which also costs 2 and taps for 1, but we can also pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. And then Hedron Archive is essentially a doubled version of Mind Stone. It taps for colorless, and we can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. Next up, there's Sisay's Ring and Urgolem's Eye, both of which are the exact same thing as Hedron Archive, but they can't be sacrificed to draw 2 cards. And then Firemind Vessel is very similar. It enters the battlefield tapped, and we can tap it for 2 mana of different colors. Up next is Unstable Obelisk, which costs 3 and taps for a colorless, and we can pay 7 to tap and sacrifice to destroy target permanent. Mono red decks really struggle with dealing with certain types of permanents, so this can come in huge. And then Hazaret's Monument also costs 3, and it's going to make all of our red creature spells cost 1 less to cast. On top of that, whenever we cast a creature spell, we can discard a card. If we do, we draw a card. While this isn't card advantage, it is card selection, which can really help us out. Next up, there's Generator Servant, which can help us attack with our commander as early as turn 3. We can tap and sacrifice it to add colorless to our mana pool, and if that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. This can really help us get a good head start and get ahead of our opponents early. And then there's Emrakul's Hatcher, and when it enters the battlefield, we create 3/0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens that we can sacrifice for a colorless. So we can either cast this for some temporary ramp, or we can actually abuse its enter the battlefield effect by having it come into play with Ilharg. It will come into play attacking though, so we do have to be mindful with who we're attacking with it. And finally, there's Mana Geyser, which is going to add red to our mana pool for each tapped land our opponents control. Now this card can be situational, but generally it's going to add us a lot of mana at once. We're running a lot of ramp in this deck, and for good reason. Cheating our creatures onto the battlefield with Ilharg is great, but we also want to cast them too. We're running a ton of creatures with high converted mana cost, so we need the ramp to back it up. But let's talk about how we can get off to a fast start as soon as we get Ilharg into play. So it's time to move on to tactic number 2, Lipstick on a Pig. First up, there's Hammer of Perforos, which is going to give all creatures we control haste. And if we need to, we can use it to sacrifice a land to put a 3/3 into play. The main reason that this card is in this deck though is for that haste. It's not only important that we give our commander haste, but also our other creatures too. But we are going to be including Bloodsworn Steward, which is just going to help out our commander. As long as it's in play, it's going to give our commander +2/+2 in haste. And an 8/8 with trample is going to be even harder for opponents to block. Finally, there's Ogre Battle Driver, which says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. This not only gives our creatures haste, but also helps them get some extra damage in. Now, giving Ilharg haste is great, but we need to make sure that its attacks are getting through. So let's go on to tactic number 3, When Pigs Fly. First up, there's Whisper Silk Cloak, which serves a dual purpose in this deck. Not only does it make it so that Ilharg can't be blocked, but it also gives it Shroud. This not only protects Ilharg in combat, but out of combat. And then there's Cobbled Wings and Fleet Feather Sandals, each of which give Ilharg flying. Fleet Feather Sandals does cost 1 extra to equip, but it's also going to give it haste. Most of the time, flying is going to be enough to get Ilharg through on at least one opponent. Next up, there's Executioner's Hood, which is going to give Ilharg Intimidate. Essentially, this means that our commander can't be blocked except by red creatures or artifact creatures. And then there's Prowler's Helm, which makes it so that Ilharg can't be blocked except by walls. And we're in luck because the vast majority of decks don't run any walls. Finally, there's Key to the City, which has tap, discard a card, up to one target creature can't be blocked this turn. This is a fantastic way to guarantee that one of our creatures gets through. On top of that, when it becomes untapped, we can pay 2, and if we do, we draw a card. So on top of making one of our creatures unblockable, we can use it to loot. Mono Red doesn't have that many great draw spells, so this can come in really handy. Now these cards are great, but they're not the only ways that we can use to get our commander through. So let's go on to tactic number 4, They Call Me Mr. Pig. First up, there's Phyrexian Colossus, which is an 8/8 that can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So on its own, it's a fantastic attacker, and it's very hard for opponents to actually block. But later in the game, life totals are going to be lower, and they may have to block it. And this could allow one of our smaller creatures to get through, including our commander. But then there's Breaker of Armies, which does a much better job at getting our other creatures through. It's a 10/8, and every single creature that can block it has to. Not only can this help us get our creatures through, but it's also a fantastic way at getting rid of some of our opponent's pesky creatures. And then there's Thundermare, which ensures that we get through with every single one of our creatures no matter who we're attacking. When it comes into play, we get to tap down every single creature on the board. Next up, there's Goblin War Drums, which is going to give all of our creatures Menace. Menace makes it really difficult for our opponents to block effectively or even at all. And finally, there's War Cadence, which is another great way to get all of our creatures through. It has pay X and a red. This turn, creatures can't block unless their controller pays X for each blocking creature they control. So essentially, this is a tax on our opponents for each blocker that they want to use. This makes it very difficult for them to block with just a few blockers or even block at all. This card is actually pretty flexible because we can actually use it in a very political way too. If one of our opponents is attacking another player, we can help them get their creatures through if we want to. But mainly, we're just going to be using it to get our own creatures through. But what are some of those creatures that we're going to be sneaking in with Ilharg? Let's go through them now in tactic number 5, Happy as a Pig in Mud. First up, there's Demanding Dragon, which is going to make one of our opponents make a tough decision. When it enters the battlefield, it's going to deal 5 damage to target opponent unless they sacrifice a creature. Now, our opponent's going to make the best decision for them, but it's still not a great decision for them to make. And then there's Mordant Dragon, which when it deals combat damage to a player, we can have it deal that much damage to target creature that player controls. This is not only a great way to get some damage in, but also to take out one of our opponent's better creatures. Next up, we have Chaos Maw and Crater Hellion, which can both take out a ton of creatures at once. When Chaos Maw enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to each other creature. Crater Hellion does the exact same thing, but it's 4 damage. Now, we do have to be careful with these because we want to keep our commander alive. But both of these are great repeatable ways to pretty much make it so that our opponents can't play any small creatures. And because they come back to our hand at the end of the turn, we don't even have to worry about Crater Hellion's echo cost. And then we're going to be running Fanatic of Mogis, which can deal a ton of damage to all of our opponents at once. When it enters the battlefield, it's going to deal damage equal to our Devotion to Red to each opponent. Now, it only has 2 toughness, so we might only get 1 shot with it, but it's still going to be worth it. Next up, we have a few enter the battlefield effects that hit both creatures and opponents. Burning Sun's Avatar is going to deal 3 damage to a creature and 3 damage to an opponent. Spawn of Thraxes deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of mountains we control. And then Begarden Hellkite deals 5 damage divided as we choose among any number of targets. Now, each of these has their own advantages and disadvantages compared to each other, but they're still very effective in the stack. Next, we're going to be running some permanent removal with Meteor Golem, Steel Hellkite, and Tyrant of Discord. When Meteor Golem enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls. And then with Steel Hellkite, we can pay X to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. And then Tyrant of Discord is a bit more random, but it can still be very effective. When it enters the battlefield, we get to make target opponent choose a permanent they control at random and sacrifice it. If a non-land permanent is sacrificed this way, we get to repeat the process. As I mentioned before, mono-red decks really have a problem with dealing with certain types of permanents. Each of these might go about it in their own way, but they can still be all very effective. And finally, there's Mere Battlesphere, which is going to create 4 tokens when it comes into play. Now, these tokens might be 1/1s, but they can make great blockers for this deck. Also, if we ever hardcast Mere Battlesphere and attack with it, we can use its second trigger too. Because whenever it attacks, we can tap X untap Mere we control, and if we do, Mere Battlesphere gets +X+0 until end of turn and deals X damage to target player or planeswalker it's attacking. So after a few turns of building up our Mere army, this can deal a ton of damage to an opponent. Now, a lot of creatures in this deck are big and have some pretty big effects, but we've got ways to make them even deadlier. Let's go through those ways now in tactic number 6, Pork Power. First up, there's Avatar of Slaughter, which says, all creatures have double strike and attack each turn if able. This card works especially well in this deck because Ilharg makes it so that we're just the ones that are benefiting from it. On top of that, if one of our opponents can't block this is just straight up 16 damage coming through. Next up, there's Engrass Marauders, which is very brutal in this deck. It makes it so that each of our sources basically deals double damage. Now, this is great if we can surprise our opponents with it, but it's even better if we already have it on the field. Essentially, all of our enter the battlefield effects then are going to double up on damage. This can lead to some very explosive plays and help us finish out the game quickly. And finally, we're going to be running Berserker's Onslaught, which is an enchantment that's going to give all of our attacking creatures double strike. While this isn't a creature that we can surprise our opponents with, it does have upside because it's a little harder for for our opponents to deal with. But how do we ensure that we can get to these explosive cards as well as others that can help us finish out the game? Let's go through some of those ways now in tactic number 7, Bacon Bits. First up, there's Magmatic Insight, which lets us draw 2 cards for the price of discarding a land. And then Tormenting Voice and Wild Guess let us discard any card for the same effect. Mono red decks don't have the best options when it comes to drawing cards, but these will do most of the time. And then there's Cathartic Reunion, which is very similar. At the cost of discarding 2 cards, we get to draw 3 cards. Next up, we've got some repeatable sources of draw for this deck with Sandstone Oracle and Dragon Mage. When Sandstone Oracle enters the battlefield, we choose an opponent, and if that player has more cards in hand than us, we get to draw cards equal to the difference. And then when Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, everyone discards their hand and draws 7 cards. Next up, we've got Mindclaw Shaman, which can be very effective in the right situation. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand, and we can cast an instant or sorcery card from their hand without paying its mana cost. Now this can help us in a variety of ways to cast spells that we wouldn't normally be able to cast in mono red. But there's also the potential to whiff with this card too, so we have to be careful when we use it. And finally, there's Outpost Siege, which can serve a dual purpose for this deck. When it comes into play, we get to choose either Khans or Dragons. If we choose Khans, at the beginning of our upkeep, we get to exile the top card of our library, and until the end of the turn, we can play that card. If we choose Dragons, whenever a creature we control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to our creature or player. So if we need access to more cards, we can choose Khans, and if we need to deal some damage, we can choose Dragons. Keep in mind though that if you choose Khans, you can't put that exiled card into play with Ilharg's ability. There are a few ways that we can really abuse Ilharg's attack trigger though. Let's go through some of them now in tactic number 8, Swinging Swine. First up, there's Relentless Assault, which is going to untap all creatures that attack this turn, and after this main phase, there's an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. Essentially, this card allows us to cheat 2 creatures into play in a turn. And that first creature that we cheated in gets to attack twice. Another way to do this comes with Hellkite Charger. When it attacks, you can pay 5 red to get that same effect. Now, keep in mind that unfortunately, we can't use this in tandem with Ilharg's trigger. Since Ilharg puts the creature into play already attacking, we don't get any attack triggers. We will have to have Hellkite Charger already on the battlefield to take advantage of this, but it's still a very powerful effect and worth keeping in the deck. And the more creatures that we already have on the battlefield, the more damage that we can do. But what are some other ways for us to gain value from our giant creatures? Let's go through some of those ways now in tactic number 9, Pig to the Slaughter. First up, there's Electropotence, which says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 and a red. If you do, that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. Now, we may not be able to get this effect when we cast a creature, but we can definitely pay for it when Ilharg puts that creature into play. And then there's Where Ancients Tread, which says whenever a creature with power 5 or greater enters the battlefield under our control, we can have Where Ancients Tread deal 5 damage to our creature or player. So both of these have their pluses and minuses. We have plenty of creatures in this deck that have more than 5 power, so Electropotence can actually deal more damage. But Where Ancients Tread doesn't cost us anything to activate, so it's going to be better in certain situations. But we've got an even better card in this deck that takes the best of both of these cards and basically puts it into one. And that's going to be the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Warstorm Surge. It's an enchantment that costs 5 and a red, and it says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So not only is this a free effect, but it also takes into account the creature's power. So if something like Breaker of Armies comes into play, we're going to be dealing 10 damage to any target. That can easily take out one of the best creatures or planeswalkers on the board. Or we can use that damage to take a player out or just put a huge dent in their life total. This card really takes the most advantage of being able to cheat in huge creatures with Ilharg's effect. And on top of that, it still benefits us whenever we actually cast those creatures too. If our opponents let this stick around, we can quickly take over the game and win. This card provides us with an absurd amount of value, and that's why it's the Golden Pig. Next up, there's Sarkhan's Unsealing, which is not quite as good, but is still very effective in its own right. It says whenever you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, Sarkhan's Unsealing deals 4 damage to any target. And then whenever you cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, Sarkhan's Unsealing deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. So this is only going to trigger when we cast creatures, but it can make a huge impact. But what are some ways that we can really take advantage of our enter the battlefield effects in cards like Warstorm Surge? Let's go through them in our final tactic, which is tactic number 10, Go the Whole Hog. By paying 2 and sacrificing Voyager Staff, we can blink a creature. Not only does this help us abuse enter the battlefield effects, but it can also help us save one of our creatures if we need to. On top of that, we can use this to keep one of our creatures on the battlefield permanently if we put them into play with Ilharg's ability. When they come back into play at the beginning of the next end step, we don't have to return them back to our hand because they're considered a new permanent. This is a great way for us to essentially cheat a creature into play. Another way to do this is with Sign on Sanctum. We can pay 2 and tap it to exile target permanent that we control. And then we can pay 2 to sacrifice it to bring back all those exiled cards. We do have to be very careful with this though, because an opponent can remove it before we can sacrifice it. This can still be a very good way for us to abuse enter the battlefield effects though, and to keep creatures permanently. Some great repeatable ways to abuse some enter the battlefield effects though come from Flame Shadow Conjuring and Minion Reflector. They essentially do the exact same thing. Whenever a creature comes into play under our control, we can pay a certain amount of mana, and then we create a token of that creature. Flame Shadow's effect costs us a red, and Minion Reflectors cost us 2 generic mana. That token will leave at the end of the turn, but we still get that enter the battlefield effect. And finally, a free way to potentially get a ton of these triggers comes from Mirror March. It says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So this card is definitely more variable, but we don't have to pay for its effect. And if we win a couple of those coin flips, this can be very explosive. Keep in mind with these effects, we can attack with these tokens if they're from a creature that we cast in our first main phase. But if it's a creature that we snuck in with Ilharg, we're not going to get to attack with those, but we still get their enter the battlefield triggers. This deck is very aggressive and can have some really explosive turns. But now that we've gone through the cards that help us win with this deck, let's go through the cards that help make it happen. It's time to go on to the mana base. First up, we're going to be running Rogue's Passage, which can either tap for a colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make target creature unblockable until end of turn. And then the rest of our mana base is very simple. We're just going to be running 36 mountains. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGPLAYER optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Ilharg EDH rec deck is going to set you back $154.76, so let's see what we compare to that. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at just $24.98. And just a quick reminder that our deck cost actually doesn't include our commander because it is a commander excluded episode. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are built to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades that you can add into the deck and what I would take out for those cards too. Just a quick disclaimer before we get into this, these reasonable upgrades are going to be completely based off of my own perspective. When you're making choices on how to adjust your deck, you're taking your own playstyle and meta into account. So make sure that you factor that in when it comes to making your own decisions on what to swap in and what to swap out. Now that we're on the same page, let's go through how I personally would upgrade the deck. First up, let's upgrade this deck by adding in Swiftfoot Boots, which comes in at $1.95. It's an equipment that costs 2 and it costs 1 to equip, and it says equip creature has hexproof and haste. To put this in, we're going to be taking out Goblin War Drums. Swiftfoot Boots is one of the best ways that we can protect our commander. On top of that, it gives Ilharg haste so it can swing right away. It may not protect our commander in combat, but we've got plenty of other ways to do that. Because of that, we're taking out Goblin War Drums, which doesn't always protect it anyway. And then let's upgrade this deck by adding in Combustible Gearhulk, which comes in at $2.64. It's a 6/6 construct with first strike that costs 4 red. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent may have us draw 3 cards. If that player doesn't, then we put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard, then it deals damage to that player equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. To put this in, we're going to be taking out Magmatic Insight. The vast majority of the time, the opponent is going to let us draw those cards, especially with a deck like this that has a ton of high converted mana cost spells. This is a great repeatable effect that we can abuse with Ilharg's trigger. Magmatic Insight can be great in the right situation, but it can also just be a dead card. Next up, let's add in Balefire Dragon, which comes in at $7.33. It's a 6/6 dragon with flying that costs 5 red. It says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. To put this in, we're going to be taking out Phyrexian Colossus. Balefire Dragon is pretty much a repeatable board wipe in this deck. Not only does it come out of nowhere with Ilharg's trigger, but it can also be protected by coming back to our hand. Phyrexian Colossus is nowhere near as impactful, so this is an easy swap for us. And then let's add in Panharmonicon, which comes in at $6.55. It's an artifact that costs 4, and it says if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. To put this in, we're going to be taking out Mindclaw Shaman. Panharmonicon is an absolute bomb in this deck. We have a ton of enter the battlefield triggers that are going to be happening, and this will double up every single one of them. Mindclaw Shaman can be very impactful in the right situation, but it can also whiff. Next up, let's upgrade this deck by adding in Conjurer's Closet, which comes in at $3.87. It's an artifact that costs 5, and it says at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. To put this in, let's take out Voyager Staff. Conjurer's Closet is essentially a repeatable Voyager Staff. While we can't use it to save a creature, it makes up for that because it happens every single turn. And finally, let's add in Sundial the Infinite, which comes in at $3.98. It's an artifact that costs 2, and we can pay 1 to tap it to end the turn, but we can only activate this ability during our turn. To put this in, we're going to be taking out Synod Sanctum. We can use Sundial the Infinite to permanently keep creatures that we cheat in with Ilharg if we want to. While we won't get any of those enter the battlefield effects again like Synod Sanctum does, it's much more dependable. And with that, this show is coming to a close, but I really just want to hear about what you guys think about this episode, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. When you're buying a deck or just individual cards, make sure to use our link in the description. Not only will you be getting great prices on TCGPLAYER, but you're also going to be supporting this show because they sponsor us. And make sure that you follow us on social media so you can get some early hints on who the next commander just might be. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, check out some of our other episodes on budget deck techs, Quest for Quarters episodes, Commander topics, and Creators Quarters. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again, and have a good one.